We are in our third session. The topic is the government accounting and sustainability reporting. So now I invite our session chairman, Professor Mumtaz Uddin Ahmed, President of ICMA Bangladesh. Professor Mumtaz Uddin Ahmed is the elected President of the Institute of Cost of Management Accountants of Bangladesh for the year 2012. Professor Ahmed has served as consultant for World Bank funded projects. He is a life member of the Bangladesh Economic Association. He is an elected member of the Senate and Finance Committee of the Dhaka University. Presently, Professor Ahmed is the chairman of the Department of Accounting and Information Systems, University of Dhaka. Now I invite Professor Ahmed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I first thanks the organizers to give me a chance to be here to conduct a session as a chairman. The topic is governmental accounting and sustainability reporting. We have three speakers here. First of all, I introduce Mr. Kanagas Sabapati, and he presents the paper on good governance and public accountability. Mr. Sabapati holds a master's in public administration from the Harvard University, United States of America. He is the fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, the Institute of Public Finance and Development Accountants, the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka, and the Association of Accounting Technicians of Sri Lanka. He serves in different organizations in different capacity. He is the director of Board of Merchant Bank of Sri Lanka, Lanka Hydraulic Institutes, Hotel Developers Lanka, and etc. From his vast experience and diversified area of work, I hope he will present the papers in a befitting manner, and everyone, including me, also benefited from his deliberation. May I request Mr. Sabapati to present the paper.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction, the chairman, the speakers, and colleagues. It gives me great pleasure in taking part in this highly rated summit. I think we should be all proud of having Lakshmana Vatavale to be the chairman of SAFA-CMA and organizing this seminar or this summit at this high level. We have been listening to very high-level technical presentations in the morning. I'm sure even the rest of the papers are also going to be highly technical, and also it is very timely and appropriate. And I think if you look back to Lakshmana Vatavale, his visionary leadership, I think he has been continuously involved in the development of the profession. He has been the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and he has been instrumental to set up the AAT institution and bring this up to this highest level. And now he has started this CMA, and within a short period, he has brought this to this level, and having organized a summit of this nature, I feel I am very proud and honored to be taking part in this summit to make a presentation. But only thing is, don't expect that my presentation is going to be a technical presentation, because the subject matter is government accounting and sustainability reporting. And also the subject assigned to me is also good governance and public accountability. So I am going to speak about the governance and accountability arrangements in the public sector, and particularly relevant to Sri Lanka, and also to seek some of the reform initiatives taken by the government to strengthen the good governance and public accountability in this country, making use of the international best practices. So my presentation will be limited to the public sector governance and accountability, which I'm sure everybody will accept. The governance and accountability is very fundamental for sustainability development goals of the government. So the government has an obligation to ensure very strong governance and accountability mechanism, strongly backed by the legal and other regulatory framework, which I think we should be proud about what we are having now. There are a lot of reform initiatives is being taken. So I will address some of those concerns currently facing the public sector governance and accountability. So my presentation will be largely based on Sri Lankan context. And also, as I told you, it may not be that highly technical. It is basically explaining as to what our governance and accountability framework is. So my attempt on this paper has been to discuss the governance and accountability in relation to public sector, covering these following aspects. I will just touch on the good governance principles and accountability principles, and also the justification of the need for governance and public accountability, and public sector governance and accountability framework in Sri Lanka, and parliamentary oversight and public accountability, limitations and concerns of governance and accountability, reform initiatives of the government, and the lessons learned from the global financial crisis, and currently the new public management initiatives, and also some aspects of the conclusion from my paper. So in order to maintain the time frame, I will go through this presentation and the questions and answers session, if there is anything we could discuss. Otherwise, if you go to elaborate each and every point, it will take time, and the chairman may not be permitting me to continue and complete my presentation. So I will go through this presentation quickly, maybe at fast, because there is nothing technical for us to get involved in this. I think everybody agrees, while the governance refers to structure and process of decision-making, control and behaviors of the government, the public accountability refers to accounting for their actions. In a democratically elected government, people elect the parliamentarians, and the power to manage the public funds are in their hands. The government derives the power from the people, and therefore they have to be accountable to the people. The parliament, having approved the budget, passed legislative enactments, providing the legal framework for governance and for the purpose of monitoring the executive. Now, in the public sector governance and accountability framework, there are three players: the parliament, the executive, and the auditor general. They are the three key players in the public sector governance structure. So we will go into that a little later. So the parliament, having approved the budget, and they have to have the framework for monitoring whether the executive is performing the task as envisaged in the government budget. The executive is expected to implement the budget within the framework set by the parliament, and they are accountable for the performance. The public sector governance world over had been control-oriented, concentrating on conformity, compliance, rather than performance-oriented or results-oriented. I think Sri Lanka is also not an exception. World over, it has been the same, except the reform-oriented countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa. Some of these countries are very highly reform-minded, and they have introduced new public management, basically results-based or performance-based orientation, but we are yet to come up to that position. Today, the countries are moving away from the traditional input-focused control approach to value for money-focused performance approach. looking at outputs and outcome rather than concentrating on controlling the inputs part only. The results-based budgeting, accounting, and reporting practices are emerging in these countries. Today, the performance-based budgeting and performance-based accounting, reporting, etc. is emerging. Annual reports and accounts and the independent report of the Auditor General becomes more informative to serve the purpose of discharging public accountability by the executive. So proper governance structure and accountability mechanisms ensure effective performance. Good governance and public accountability is the foundation for sustainable performance management and accounting and reporting. I think it has to be very sound if you want to ensure sustainable performance and also accounting part and the reporting. While the governance refers to the structure and process of decision-making, control, and behaviors of the government, the public accountability refers to accounting for the actions. I'm sorry, I am going back on this. There is some problem. Yeah. Segregation of ownership and management gives rise to conflict of interest between the managers and the owners. Always the case, whether it is in the private sector or public sector. I think shareholders appoint the board of directors and they don't take part in the day-to-day operation. The entire management is in the hands of the board of management and they can play out if they are not professional and if they are not having a proper governance and accountability structure. Today, corporate governance practices are emerging and therefore, it is always the case. And similarly, I think we can draw parallel to the private company model to the government structure as well. Because people elect the parliamentarians or the government in power, and the government is entrusted with the resources to manage their affairs to meet their expectations. So while the people of the country own the resources, they are the owners of the resources, elected politicians and the selected public servants are managing the public sector. There are two categories of public servants. One is the elected public politicians or parliamentarians, and the other is the selected public servants. In the absence of good governance and public accountability framework, backed by strong legal and institutional arrangements, managers attempt to make their decisions in their own interest. This has happened in the private sector, and that is how the governance structure has come, corporate governance structure. Everybody today speaks of corporate governance practices. Abuse of power in misappropriation of public funds, bribery and corruption, manipulation and misstatements, high and excessive executive pay, wastages, extravagance, and related party transaction would become common occurrences if you don't have proper governance framework and the accountability framework. Good governance embodies the principle of honesty. Now, this is speaking about the principles of public accountability and the governance. Good governance embodies the principle of honesty, objectivity, integrity, transparency, and ethics. This is the thing that is failing today. The unethical behavior is responsible for the world crisis. So, I think it is very important that the governance principles should embody honesty, integrity, transparency, and ethics. Accountability has many dimensions. Traditionally, of course, it means discharging responsibilities in compliance with rules or regulations, statutes, policies, and procedures. Only compliance aspect. But ideally, it should demonstrate that the responsibilities have been discharged in accordance with the agreed performance standards. That never happens. So that has to come in. The duty of care, diligence, code of conduct, and ethics covering conflicts of interest, confidentiality, fair dealing, protection of proper use of resources, compliance with laws, rules, and regulations, and reporting any illegal or unethical behaviors from important elements form the important elements of good governance and public accountability. So these have to be highlighted and reviewed by the accountability mechanism which is in place if you want to ensure good governance and accountability to ensure sustainable development in the country. People run the risk of managers engaging in practices detrimental to their benefits. If there is no proper governance and accountability structure, then the people who are owners of resources will run the risk of managers engaging in practices which are detrimental to the benefits of the people. They have very little role to play once they have elected the government to power. They can't do anything. Like the shareholders, when they appoint the directors, they cannot go and interfere with what is happening. The board of directors are entrusted with the full responsibility of managing the affairs. Introduction of good governance framework and effective public accountability arrangements set the tone of the organization and bring about financial discipline. So the top management should set the tone of the top. That is very important to bring it down to the people's benefit. The resources are utilized to the benefit of the people and to maintain financial discipline. It paves way for the effective financial management practices, ensuring orderly, efficient management of resources, improved financial and operational performance, free from bribery and corruption. The core decision making through strategic planning, establishing the vision, mission, and objectives. The responsibility comes downwards, accountability goes upwards. Once the parliamentarians are selected, the government in power has to make their strategic policies, decisions, vision, mission, objectives, and transforming the various inputs, manpower, machinery, and all that, and then set up the business or set up the activities, and then they have to accountable back to the people, that is the parliament. So the responsibility comes downwards and the accountability goes upwards, which is common in the public sector as well as in the private sector. The effective professional management and establishment of effective internal control mechanism, internal audit arrangements, and risk management practices becomes very important. Installation of proper management information system facilitate effective progress review and monitoring. Timely submission of annual reports and accounts with adequate disclosures in compliance with the international best practices create public confidence and raise the image of public sector in the eyes of the public. Now to speak about the governance framework in this country, if you take Sri Lanka is a free, sovereign, independent, democratic, socialist republic and adopts a parliamentary form of governance. I think this is same in our part of the country. I think almost all the SAFA countries are adopting. We have inherited this from the British and making various modifications to the governance structure. The public sector governance in Sri Lanka is backed by a strong legal and regulatory framework and institutional arrangements. The framework is based on the democratic orientation, on the principle of the sovereignty is in the people and is not alienable. While the Constitution provides for broad legal framework, our Constitution has only one chapter on public financial management, which has only 7 articles, very skeletal provision, but of course very broad provisions for public financial management. Basically, the parliamentary control of public finance. The Constitution says Parliament shall have the full control of public finance. Based on that, they have few provisions. Unfortunately, we don't have also strong financial, public financial legislation to at least to address the shortcomings. We will come to that as we go along. While the Constitution provides the broad legal framework, there are other legislative enactments and other rules and regulations deal with, sorry, I think now itself a warning has come. While the Constitution provides for all this, there are other legal statutes and other regulatory framework which provides for the governance and accountability framework. And I will not go into this. This handout is there. I think it's printed in the technical book, so you can read this. These are the various institutional arrangements we have in place in terms of the Constitution. The Parliament roles, I think everybody knows. The President role is also identified. The Cabinet of Ministers and the Minister of Finance, of course, is entrusted with the entire responsibility of public financial management in terms of the Constitution by the President. And there are Treasury Department which performs that function on behalf of the Minister of Finance. Then there are secretaries to ministries who act as accounting officers and chief accounting officers to assist the finance manager in the accountability arrangements. And then there is an independent public service commission. And also we have a similar setup, governance structure through the 13th Amendment to the Constitution in the provincial setup. We have 9 provincial councils, and also the Provincial Councils Act provide similar structure for governance and financial governance and accountability arrangements. Then also we have set up public corporations They are commercial, non-commercial, they perform regulatory, statutory, and also they have promotional, research, training, that type of activities handled by public corporations. Local authorities, we have municipalities, we have urban council, we have Pradeshya Sabhas. Our public sector is very large, very wide, large, and also complex because they are not homogeneous. We have the central government, we have the local government, we have the SOEs, and also we have the provincial councils. So we have a complexity. And of course, the Finance Act provides financial control of public corporations, and financial regulation provide the financial management in the public sector proper, and establishment code, of course, provide for the personnel establishment and administrative matters in the public sector. Now, parliamentary oversight is the final mechanism we have to test on the public accountability. The parliament, having approved the budget, they had to oversee the work of the public sector based on reports of the Auditor General through 2 oversight committees. And of course, I think you can go through this, how these systems operate. We have 2 committees, COPA and COPE, and they are consisting of opposition and government members, 31 members in each of the committee. COPA means Committee on Public Accounts, that monitors or supervises or examines the departments and ministries, and the COPE, that is Committee on Public Enterprises, that examines the public enterprises, the review of public enterprises. I think this is something similar to the Indian arrangement. We have set up 2 committees. In many countries, they have only 1 committee, which is called PAC, or Public Accounts Committee, or Committee on Public Accounts. Then about these 3 players of the parliamentary control, I have discussed this, but because of the time constraints, I am leaving it out for you to read from the book. Then parliamentary oversight function also, I have discussed in detail how this examination takes place, what their powers are. They have wide powers, they can summon anybody, even the retired people can be summoned, they can question, and also their recommendations become directives, and the executive has to carry out those directives. Also, I must mention that in the recent past, these examinations and the reports which are tabled in Parliament has attracted a lot of media attention, and this is being discussed. And based on the report, there has been a lot of directions to Bribery Commission, Fraud Bureau, CID. So many things are happening today, not like those days. So therefore, we must see that there is a lot of improvement in the parliamentary oversight functions, because unless the parliamentary oversight is effectively carried out, the whole purpose will be lost. And of course, to do that, the Parliamentary Oversight Committee should be strengthened. They should have the professional assistant, the research people, the facilities of, today's communication facilities, email, e-governance, and all that should be in place. But unfortunately, these are not fully available in the Parliamentary Secretariat. So, of course, the initiatives are taken by the government as well as the Parliamentary Secretariat to modernize and to go into all these requirements so that this review process will be very effective. So I have discussed in detail about the parliamentary oversight. Of course, this is very important. Give me 5 minutes to go through these limitations and concerns over governance and public accountability. There are a lot of problems we have seen in the past. Inadequate coverage in the Constitution, very skeletal provisions, absence of comprehensive public finance legislation. We have an outdated Public Finance Act of 1971. And also political dominance in the administration is also a problem. Outdated legislative enactments. In addition to Finance Act, there are so many statutes which come from the British period also. And some of them we are yet to amend. And also lack of proper management information system for effective decision making and progress monitoring, unrealistic budgeting because of the cash flow constraint, the budget implementation becomes difficult, the money releases are constraints. Then we have cash-based accounting instead of accrual-based accounting. For effective decision making, it is lacking. And public poor assets and liability management, I think it has come out in the previous presentations as well. Ineffective internal auditing. And also, we don't report the assets and liabilities in our balance sheet, government balance sheet. Absence of code of conduct and ethics for public servants, except few sectors they have. Lack of transparent performance indicators and performance monitoring. Poor management and performance appraisal system. inadequate professional skills in the capacity of public financial management professionals, because government cannot attract professionals because they pay peanuts. The private sector pays lavishly, and therefore all the professionals join the private sector. So it's very difficult for the government to attract professionals, so they have a problem of that. Delays in court proceedings, absence of strong media reporting, and also Right of Information Act is not forthcoming. It has been planned, but it has to come. Then government has taken several reform initiatives to improve the governance and accountability in the public sector, which some of them include the following. Now, strong policy framework is the basis for our 10-year development strategy. We have Mahinda Chindana as the policy framework. Based on that, we have a 10-year development strategy. Enactment of Fiscal Management Responsibility Act, which is a masterpiece of legislation for committing the government for transparency and accountability. Various reports have to be submitted by the minister in parliament at various stages, explaining the strategy, the performance, and all that can be picked up by media, civil society organization can discuss all that. So that is a very recent publication, I think recent enactment. 2003 it was published, it was enacted. And also we have the medium-term multi-year budgeting, now commitment for continuous budgets, implementation, and results-based framework for budgeting. These are new innovative things that are coming up. Introduction to results-based budgetary framework with the basic performance indicators. Taxation reform through new legislative enactments. Modernized accounting and reporting process, moving towards annual accounting and reporting. And also introduction of public sector accounting standard. I think Sri Lanka has taken the leadership in converting the IBSAs or adopting the IBSAs in Sri Lanka as Sri Lanka public sector accounting standard. We have already published 5 standards. We are in the process of finalizing another 6 standards. So there will be 10 public accounting standard based on IBSAs, International Public Sector Accounting Standard, will be available very soon. Then strengthening the parliamentary oversight committees, Auditor General Department, capacity building, and all that is going pell-mell, I would say. And similarly, the Ministry of Finance and the Internal Audit Department, the training, capacity building, and all that is being carried out at a fast-track basis. And introduction of audit committees in the ministries and departments based on the corporate governance practices. Now public sector also having audit committees for regular follow-up actions. Strengthening corporate governance practices in public enterprises. Now we have issued a comprehensive guide on corporate governance practices for all public enterprises, and that is being very rigidly being followed up. And also the age-old financial regulation is being revised, and very soon we will have them. Just to speak on the lessons from global financial crisis, it would be noted that greed, poor governance, and accountability have been the major cause for the crisis. Despite strong framework of governance and accountability framework, lack of supervision and monitoring have resulted in systemic failure at all levels. The professional misconduct, conflict of interest, related party transaction, lack of independence of audit committee deliberation, failures of regulatory mechanism, honesty, integrity, transparency, and accountability breakdown, and ethical behavior has resulted in collapse of government, which contributed to the crisis. Collapse of governance, and which has contributed to the crisis. The crisis, of course, have opened the eyes of several governments and regulatory institutions and professional bodies to strengthen their professional conducts and ethics and good governance practices. So we are also not an exception. We have taken a lot of initiatives and new public management initiatives. The new public management initiative envisages moving away from the traditional input control, conformity, and compliance to performance management, focusing on results, outputs, and outcome. Migration to accrual system. Now that is in a big way. Government departments and ministries are now trying to migrate, fast-track their accounting system to fall into accrual system, so that assets, liabilities, and a comprehensive financial reporting, like the New Zealand or Australia, now they are reporting like private sector. The entire country's net worth could be seen from the government balance sheet. We also must look for that. So it is being now followed up. Very soon we will have this. I must mention that currently the government consolidated accounts audited and published as part of the Ministry of Finance annual report within 5 months after the close of the financial year, which you cannot believe. I think in this part of the country, we are taking a lead in that direction, and we are every year, from 2002 we started, every year we are improving additional disclosures of information, and we are in the path of accrual system so that we will have full accountability reporting. And of course, budgeting, accounting, reporting, information technology development, emerging requirements of internal control and audit, risk management practices, reporting whole government accounts, consolidation of the whole government. Currently, of course, we don't consolidate the public enterprises and the local authorities and so on, but whole government accounts consolidation should come, complying with the international best practices and accounting standards, which are some of the major challenges faced by the Sri Lankan public sector. Conclusions: good governance and public accountability is the key to achieve the development goals of the country, and maintain sustainability. Public sector reform is a global trend in this regard, and Sri Lanka is not an exception. Government has taken several initiatives to improve the governance and accountability, moving towards new public management. Good regulatory framework, institutional arrangement, systems and procedures are very fundamental to improve the governance and accountability. Political commitment and leadership is the key ingredient for reforms, and the current reform initiatives will no doubt improve the governance and accountability, which in turn improve the sustainability of performance, management, accounting and reporting. So that's all I wanted to present. I'm sorry to fast track this and do this because of the time constraint. I think if there are any questions on this, we could discuss it at the questions and answers session. Thank you very much for patient hearing.